Welcome to Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolf. Today, I have the privilege of talking with Brooklyn Quintana. This is the second time I have talked with her. I am very excited. She is a Florida-based artist and fantasy writer. She wrote the Fyneas Fog series starting Nine of Swords, and the next one is Blood in the Water. She has a BA in creative writing at the University of Central Florida. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And when she isn't crafting epic fantasy worlds and destroying the lives of fictional characters, the author spends her time advocating for marine conservation and turtle awareness. I read that. Is that correct as well?
That is correct. I'm a big fan of turtles.
I saw that and I was like, I'm adding that. But anyway, she's a staunch advocate for Florida's nesting sea turtles. So anyway, today we're going to talk about the second book in her series, Blood in the Water. Or is it Blood in Water or Blood in the Water?
Blood in the Water.
Blood in the Water. All right. Thank you for joining me, Brooklyn.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah. Since the last time we chatted, what have you been up to?
Oh my, I've been doing so much. So multiple in-person events all across Florida, which has been really great. And then a couple very interesting upcoming fantasy book events in Orlando in the fall. So that should be I'm very intrigued to see how it goes. We'll just say that.
That's awesome. All right. So the last time we chatted, I talked about your first book. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about your second book. What can we expect from the second book that is maybe different from the first?
I think it's almost entirely different from the first. It doesn't follow that same introductory fantasy book kind of plot points where, you know, we're introduced to the character and then we're told what he's going to be doing and then we do the adventure and it wraps up. Book two is very much like we pick up right after book one ends. There's been a catastrophe. How are we going to handle it? This is how we think we're going to handle it. And it veers wildly off in a completely different direction with a lot more tinges of horror and kind of Lewis Carroll-esque surrealism to it. So it's vastly different, I think, than book one.
I love that. Will this one take place at Moranci Academy of Military Arts as well?
Yes, or at least part of it.
Oh, at least part of it. Okay. So in your books, you have different creatures like mermaids and trees that rearrange themselves. Where are some of the other what are some of the other mythical creatures that you write about, and which ones are your favorite?
So in book one, there was a lot more like tropical based ones like Luskas. They mentioned basilisks, but there's no basilisk in book one at least. And then in book two, the mythological characters are pulled less from, I guess, like tropical ocean based mythology, and you get more like there's a reference to the Russian character of Baba Yaga is in there. And then there's like a reference to the Egyptian weighing of souls. So it's more pulled from religious iconography from different across the world things, as well as like folk tales from Eastern Europe. And I guess a little bit of Western Europe as well.
Which ones are your favorite to write about?
I really liked the Baba Yaga inspired arc that's in there. It's like a 3-chapter mini side quest type deal. And I thought it was just so fun to incorporate something that I don't think you get a lot of in modern fantasy. Like, not a lot of people are throwing out Baba Yaga and her chicken cottage. So it's really fun to pick and pull from things like that because I think it's more unique and more interesting.
So one of my favorite series, it's called The Sisters Grimm. Have you ever heard of that? It's a kids series.
I don't think so.
Oh yeah, The Sisters Grimm. Well, I love it so much that I've actually read it to all of my girls, like my oldest and even my 5-year-old. I have read it. It's actually for middle grade, but in there they have a lot of Baby Yaga.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Baba Yaga.
Yeah, Baba Yaga. I'm like, I said that wrong, but it has her chicken house too, and she definitely plays a part, and it's fun.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so then you totally know what I'm talking about, where it's like a fun chicken old lady is just in the woods. It's like a fun thing to incorporate any way you can. I think it was like really interesting to try and work it into book two's story.
So would you say you had more fun writing book one or book two?
I mean, book two definitely gave me more stress because I wrote it out of order. I will never do that again. That was a terrible decision, but it was a learning curve. I guess I had to find my way and realize that that was not what we were ever going to do again. So it was fun because the characters were already established and the world was established. So I didn't have to introduce people to anybody. So I think book two also goes a lot quicker. The pacing is just much more hit the ground running than ease you into things, because you don't need to be eased into things at this point. Like, you know who Finn is, the world he is, and you know what Morency's all about. So you just kind of throw them into it and you see what happens.
So even though last time we talked a little bit about Phineas, can you give us a brief description of his character and why you wrote him that way?
Yeah, so I grew up like in the Harry Potter Artemis Fowl generation of dark-haired young protagonists in fantasy series. So clearly I pulled from that, as that's what I wrote, but I didn't like that the character of Harry in Harry Potter is so bland. And I understand why. He's like your introduction into the magical world. You as the reader and Harry are supposed to identify and be awed by it.
So
Bless you.
sorry.
um, but you know, Harry, for the most part, he's a vehicle more for the reader to identify with, like all the crazy things that are going on, so that you can read, like, understand and react to what Harry's doing, because you're kind of in the same spot. So he's more bland until about book 5, then he just gets angsty. But Finn kind of hits the ground running at having a very clear personality. He's not there for you to identify with him. He's like a little jerk. He's a 12-year-old boy with a lot of energy. He's a cinnamon roll type character. He's very sweet, very bubbly, very outgoing, but he's also just like this little chaos tornado. And everywhere he goes, terrible things happen because he doesn't listen. He's arrogant. He's a 12-year-old boy. And I thought I wanted to write a series where it wasn't this like meek, mild, bland character that you're going with. Like, he has a very clear thought process. He has very clear opinions. He has very clear objectives. So whether or not you identify with Finn as a main character, you can't say he's not interesting.
So even though he's 12 years old, you have said that this is not geared for 12-year-olds.
Yeah, it's that weird. It's so hard to market because everybody sees 12 years old and then says, "Oh, it's for kids." And it's like, it's not. It's pretty bloody. People get shot in the neck with arrows, shot in the eyes with arrows. It's very, I mean, it's not like overtly horrific like Game of Thrones, and obviously there's no real sexual content because they are 12, but it is a very harsh world and a harsh environment, and the characters have grown up that way. So despite the fact that they're 12, they have an older kind of mentality because they have more responsibilities and they live in a much more dangerous and fatal sort of world than we do nowadays.
I noticed on the back of the book it says that Holland is also one of the main characters. Who is it's a female, I'm assuming.
He is a boy. He has a
He's
very
a boy,
girly
Holland.
name. Yeah.
Okay. So what's he like?
He is at the same time very similar to Phineas, and at the same time his absolute foil polar opposite. He is much more headstrong and confident in himself and his abilities than Finn, maybe, where Finn has the bravado of, you know, I can do it. Holland actually can. He's very talented, whereas Finn is very outgoing and sweet. He's kind of dumb, when Holland's a bit more reserved and cold, but he's very, very smart and calculating. So if Finn is like a Hufflepuff, Holland is definitely more of a Slytherin. He's got ambitions. He wants the power. He's very good at everything. He's a natural leader. And Finn ends up kind of relying on Holland's capabilities to offset his own shortcomings, and where Holland can be a bit cold and judgmental of people, he kind of has Finn there to buff that out. So as like a dynamic duo, they get a lot done. And then the moment they're separated, they're both almost entirely useless.
I love when there is a character relationship where they just rely on each other, because there's so much growth that can happen when they collide. So what was one of the most rewarding aspects of your writing experience so far as a writer?
I don't know, maybe it sounds narcissistic. I think one of the most rewarding things has been when I've gone to events and people say, like, I've seen your book around or I've heard about it. And it kind of makes it feel like, oh, okay, well, now it's worth it because people are hearing about it and they know who I am and they've heard about the book, or they've known what the cover looks like from different social media things. So, I mean, I wish I could say like the writing itself was very rewarding, but it definitely makes it worth it when people recognize you or your work and say, like, oh, I've heard it's so good, I can't wait to read it. And it's like, okay, all of these hours spent alone in a room by myself talking to myself like a lunatic has clearly paid off in some regards.
That's awesome. So I actually, Because I Google you the first time that you came on, and then I Googled you the second time. And this time, I have to admit, I found a lot more clicks of like interviews and also even just book reviews. People who aren't even interviewing you have done book reviews on YouTube of your book, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So like definitely getting that momentum going this year more than anything. I don't know what it was about 2024, but we really took off. So that's been really great and really rewarding. And with all of the things coming up, all the events and getting book 3 ready to go and writing it and doing all the marketing on the side and interviews and everything, it makes it definitely feel worth it that people are getting invested in Finn's story.
That's so cool. So, what was your inspiration by the setting that you created, the Moranci Academy?
I really like medieval architecture. I've been over to Europe, especially like England and Scotland, many, many times. So I've been very blessed to be able to do that. And I've always really loved it. And I wanted that feel, but I didn't want people to immediately say, dark haired 12-year-old boy in a castle, it's Harry Potter. And my parents live on an island here in Florida, which is now where I also live on the mainland, but like we're 12 miles away from the island. And I thought like when you're walking around and you see all the barrier reefs and the sand and the mangrove forest and everything, it just seemed like rife for being a setting for a fantasy story, because you could definitely imagine when you're walking through mangrove forest, like there's creatures in there. I mean, there definitely are. There's gators and sharks and things, but it seemed like it would be really cool. And then with the juxtaposition of having people wearing medieval knight armor traipsing through saltwater tropical jungles just seemed like a fun a kind of visual you don't normally see.
I think your background in your office kind of exemplifies like the feel. It even has the same colors as the covers.
Yeah, I really like the red and black and gold combination, if you guys can't tell. It's all over everything.
So you're currently working on the third book.
Mm-hmm.
So the first two, you covered a year at Moranci Academy. Is it going to continue there, or has it evolved somewhere else?
I don't think it'd be a spoiler to say that there's a 2-year time skip between books 2 and 3. And some shenanigans have been going on outside of the school that Finn's got to go kind of temp down and work, get the kinks out because nobody else can.
Will Holland play a big part in that one as well?
Oh, yeah. I think more than anything, book 3 is really just Holland's book. And Finn is just there at this point because he is the protagonist and Holland is like his best buddy. But book 3 overwhelmingly has a lot of Holland plot points in it.
So I know the series is called Fyneas Fog. Do you have it all from Phineas's perspective, or do you have it from other perspectives as well?
That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it. I would say book 1 is maybe like 90-95% you're following Finn. I mean, it's written in a third person omniscient POV, but you're mainly with Finn. You get glimpses of what the other kids are doing and feeling if Finn's not there. Book 2, I would say, is about 80% Finn, because now you've expanded the world and there's flashbacks to let you know kind of how we've gotten to this point and expanding the world and the lore. And you start to see the backstory of the royal family and how they founded their country and things like that. And then book 3 is not told in chronological order. So there's this time skip. I'm not going to ruin what happened in the time skip, but Finn gets kind of drip fed information throughout the book via flashbacks that are their own short stories, essentially, from other characters' point of view. Like you're kind of grabbing puzzle pieces from every angle and then building out from the center to get your puzzle finished. So if Finn's at the center of the puzzle, like all those pieces are coming to him, and then he has more clarity after all of these short stories from different perspectives. And he also, finds this journal that's told in its complete own first person story about something that happened 200 years ago that now plays into the plot. So it's much more told in the style of almost like Memento, where you're getting it backwards essentially to find out what happens, but also from multiple perspectives of people from Finn's family.
So this is just, you already have 2 books under your belt. How has been writing number 3 different than writing the first 2?
I have taken so many more notes for book 3. I think just because of the nature of book 3's very wild plot and the way I'm choosing to tell it, it requires very meticulous kind of plotting and planning and, at what time did this person do this and how are they related to Finn. So I've had family trees and years, and everybody, they married this person, these are their kids, and this is where they went, this is what castle they lived in, so that when it all finally comes together, nobody can be like, oh, she said that this person, but it's right. It's very meticulously done. And I think one of the hardest parts now of book 3 is I keep getting too interested in side characters. And I desperately am like, I want to write a novella about this and this. And I'm like, we got to finish the series first. You cannot get sidetracked.
So I do character sketches as well. I'm starting really working them out because I'm going through my edits for my book at the current moment. And I'm using Scrivener, and they have it. Is there a program that you use, or do you just use paper or just spreadsheets?
I'm going to sound like a crazy person. I have just like a handwritten notebook, and it's color coded. It's perfectly, it's like the movie A Beautiful Mind. It's like, it looks from the outset at first glance very organized, and then you get in there and there's like notes as if I wasn't the one writing the initial notes, and I'm like, oh, you need to do this and figure out what this is. But it's me talking to me. So when I explain it, I sound like I'm insane, but it's been, I don't know, very helpful. And I like having tangible notes that I can like look at, and I don't have to scroll. I can just like flip through the page and be like, there it is, it's color coded, I found it, and move on. I really love old school handwritten notes.
Nice. So one thing I found interesting is when I was looking through your biography, it said that you actually originally considered becoming a lawyer. And the funny thing is that I can see that in like your personality. And I'm like, I could see you doing that. So why did you decide to go towards a writing career instead? Or are you're more just, you do lots of different arts?
So I've always been very artsy, and I was always encouraged to go with that from a young age, especially by my grandma. She very much cheered me on to follow a more artsy path, but she was like, go to school for something that's not art, because you don't need to be taught how to write. You already know how to write, go do something else. And I said, no, I dug my heels in. I got a creative writing degree, most useless thing I've ever done. And then while I was in school for my BA in English, I, considered getting a law degree, because English degrees kind of translate well into going for a law degree. But I wanted to be a prosecutor. That was my like dream. Like I really wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to put the bad guys away, become, the district attorney. I had very lofty lawyer ambitions. I cannot argue with people without crying. And that just, I feel like wouldn't go over well. Like I would be like, Your Honor, you don't understand, and just tears. I get frustrated and I cry. And it's just like not intimidating. It's not endearing. It doesn't come across well if you're trying to be like, I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional, as you're like just crying. So I didn't think that would be for me. And I get very stressed when people yell at me also. And I can't do it. I can't have anybody mad at me. I'm a people pleaser. So I just feel like being a lawyer would just not go well. For at the moment a client got mad at me, I'd be like, I'm so sorry, I can't do this.
My friends used to joke because when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to go to school for my senior year, and the one thing they said is you could never be a cop, because apparently they just don't feel that I'm like enough. And I'm like, they're right. I could never be a cop.
No, I'm with you. I couldn't either. I get lost too. They'd be like, tell me the address to a crime, and I would never make it.
Yep, same here.
It'd be awful.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question. If you could recommend one book for me to read, but it can't be your own, what book would it be?
Oh my God. You would think I'd have an answer. Do you like nonfiction?
Oh yeah, I do.
Okay, I just read a great book about Jean-Francois Champollion, the guy who cracked the hieroglyphics on the Rosetta Stone and translated everything. It was great. It's called Cracking the Egyptian Code. I actually did a video about it on my YouTube channel because I was so moved by this book. I was like, why is this not a Netflix series? It's absolutely insane. This guy's family was like wacky. They were all super smart. And his brother was like the head of this museum, and he was sleeping in the closet, and he was learning Greek at 5 and became a professor. It's insane. He got into like a translation war with the British, and then it was a race to translate it was so crazy and insane. I had no idea the French were so involved in hieroglyphics. I mean, I knew about Napoleon going to Egypt and everything, but it's like in Napoleonic times. So it's very, very interesting. And if you read it with the conceit that this could definitely be a mini series, it becomes much more interesting.
That is so neat because I've written a series nonfiction articles on Egyptian history. I bet you I would love that.
Oh, you would definitely love it then.
Do you know the author's name?
I don't off the top of my head, but
It
was very good.
I should have messaged you saying, just be prepared.
Okay, we were back. Yeah, I usually have books behind me and it's like on my lower shelf, but no, now we're in my office.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. As I am reaching my 1 year mark, I am changing the question I've been asking everybody. And so you get to be the first one that I'm asking. It's very similar to the last question I asked, but what is the one thing you learned that has helped you the most in your writing career?
The one thing I learned that's helped me the most in my writing career, when you are a writer, you're not just a writer. You have to be a business person. You have to be a salesman. You have to wear all of the hats because even if you do have a big publishing house, most of the time, unless you're like Rebecca Yarros or Sarah J. Maas, they're not going to do a lot for you. So you kind of have to think of yourself less as a person and more of a product and get out there and sell, sell, sell. And it is hard for artsy people to do that, I feel like a lot of the times, but I think that's the biggest thing I've learned so far.
That is so true. I think that's also one of the hardest things for us writers because we love the art of it, but it's the going out and like trying to sell ourselves and market. And that's what everybody seems to say is that's the hardest part.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I definitely think so.
yeah. Well, thank you again, Brooklyn, for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me. I also want to thank my listeners. If you're interested in reading her book, the links are in the show notes. If you have been listening for a while, please rate and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening site. And this will just help not only my show, but also my authors, as it will help their books get in front of more people as well. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to listen to our first interview where we talk about her first book. Or you can also listen to fantasy writer Rebecca Maeve Hartwell. And again, I had the privilege of talking with Brooklyn Quintana, and she's the author of the books Nine of Swords and Blood in the Water. Thank you very much, Brooklyn.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this magical journey through Author's Alcove, the Reading Nook. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And remember, this episode is brought to you by Noadays.com, a company that offers many courses from how to become a freelance writer to proofreading and editing. I have personally taken some of these courses, and I am very happy with what I learned. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find the affiliate link in the show notes. I would love for you to join me on my other two podcasts as well, Author's Alcove, The Writing Corner, where we talk about everything writing, publishing, and marketing, as well as Author's Alcove, The Healing Corner, where authors share their books on healing and recovery. Until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next chapter.